All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinels of Liberty. I am your host, Redbeard. There's no fluff, there's nothing crazy that's going to be in this intro. This hopefully this one actually works. If it doesn't, I'm hoping that it is going to. Hopefully, it's going to end up working, but we will see. YouTube is being very, very dumb. All right. Okay, perfect. So it looks like this one is. So it looks like this one is working. It seems to be what I have here. But anyways, obviously, as you guys and gals can see, technical issues. YouTube, not my problem. I don't know. Maybe YouTube just doesn't like all of the insanity that's going on today. I don't know. I'm not a technological wizard. But that being said, um, we're going to talk about a pretty, I think, a deep and or interesting conversation today. I'm not going to try and drag this out. I really don't want to drag this out. Um, but you can obviously see with the title, a government destructive of its means, and we'll kind of delve into that. I did not expect that when I woke up this morning that I was going to see kind of an escalation of rhetoric, quite to the extent that we saw today, um, leading up to supposedly the complete and utter destruction of the infrastructure of Iran, um, allegedly. And there's, there just comes a point in time, I think, when people have to, you have to kind of step back and you have to figure out what, where do we go from here? But more importantly, like what is it that what is it we're willing to live with, and how are we willing to tolerate it, and so on and so forth. But we'll kind of delve into that. I want to go through the message or the comment or the tweet or whatever it is you want to call it that's been making the rounds by Trump today. So it says a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want it to happen, but it probably will. However, now that we have complete and total regime change, where different, smarter, less radicalized minds prevail, maybe something revolutionarily wonderful can happen. Who knows? We will find out tonight. One of the most important moments in the long and complex history of the world, 47 years of quote unquote extortion, corruption, and death, will finally end. God bless the great people of Iran. Very bizarre after on Easter, he said, "Praise be to Allah," but we're just going to gloss over that, I guess. As you do, even though that's really awkward. I'll be honest with you. Look, the man's only allegiance, the man's only piety is to himself. Let's not make any. Let's not quarrel about that. I mean, if it's not constantly filleting himself, it just doesn't register in his mind, right? But I'm not gonna rail on that for too long because there's other pressing things. Look, I just want to try and paint a picture here. If you or I were to convey the exact same sentiments, if you will, to somebody else online in the exact same fashion, manner, can, not candor, but like how you would say um, tempo, the way that he does things. If you or I said anything like that to some random person or to, even to your neighbor, right? Oh, my neighbor is just intolerable, just intolerable, just a horrible neighbor, just terrible, and tonight, if they don't change their way, then it's going to be the whole utter destruction and the complete ending of the lineage, that emanates from that house, right? If you and I were to say that, essentially, using the exact same like oh, these people, not only will they never be able to recover, they'll never exist ever again. Like essentially that's the premise, right? If you or I said that about our neighbor or somebody directly online, dude, you realize how fast we would have the Fed boys at our house? You realize how fast that the federal government would be knocking in your door at 2 a.m., shooting your dog, probably trying to bang your wife and kill you in the process? I mean, there's this really unique double standard that I don't think that a lot of people fundamentally understand. Morals for thee, but not for me, right? So you have this situation where it's like, oh, you're expected to be a proper human being, but because you're in government, you don't have to be a proper human being. That is the extent that we are operating on. And I think on a moral basis, a fundamental moral basis, it is reprehensible to even say something like that, to even remotely insinuate something like that. You have people, I think, pretty much across lines that are saying like, dude, guy's got to go. He's not with it anymore. He's absolutely gone down the rabbit hole. He went to Looney Tuneville, ain't coming back, right? And I would argue that, enough people have been pointing out that, there may be some peculiarities in his mental acuity, his mental fitness, if you will. The guy's not young, right? But I do think that I do think we are getting a picture of what Trump ultimately really is. When you look at certain things that really put a pressure on a person, you really start to figure out who that person is. Now, whether that's an outside influence, the weight of some type of power or responsibility, whatever the case is, but we clearly have a guy here who feels like he can get away with carte blanche. And now I'm not going to spend the whole time beating up on him, but I want to try and just put this point out here that if you or I did the same thing, you or I did the exact same thing, our doors would be kicked in, we'd be dragged out, we'd be booked, we'd be charged, probably not even charged. With the way that the U.S. federal justice system works, you'd probably be booked and sit and rot in a prison for over a year or more before you're formally charged and before you ever get any form of due process whatsoever, and beaten down and thrown into a hole. That's that's more of what this government's known for when it comes to any form of Americans. I mean, if you really have to look at how they treat Americans, I mean, there's numerous examples of what they think of you. But I know a lot of people are going to write this off as just saying it's rhetoric or saying that it's just another Trumpism. But there's been an escalation. And a lot of the things that he said, and I've always said that, yes, you have to absolutely observe what the actions are and all the things that follow that. And I do believe that's true. I hope and pray that it is, whatever happens tonight is not overwhelmingly. I just hope that it's not something that's going to. I hope it's not going to manifest in the way that he's saying it is. I guess that's the only way that I could say that. Is I hope that it's just another thing, but the insinuation and just the sheer idea that somebody thinks that it's okay to say that, like, hey, man, I am going to end your entire civilization. You as a people will fundamentally cease to exist is basically what he's saying, right? That's not something a president should be saying. It's not something that a government official fundamentally should be saying, especially when you're saying it over a war that the United States, the U.S. federal government started. It wasn't Iran that started it. U.S. federal government of the United States of America, along with Israel, started this war, right? And then now you're threatening another country's entire civilization, and that's just perfectly fine. Interesting way to do foreign policy. I'm sure that's being received well, which I don't know if you've seen, but it's not being received well. But I also want to add in here, aside from the fact that it's not just this, but the many of the other ramblings of seemingly a guy who's losing his mind little by little. Aside from this and in all of those in past weeks, and escalatory rhetoric, when you look at how this whole thing has folded or has kind of unraveled, right? At first we were going in there for nukes. Then it was for the protesters that were killed, which, by the way, they still have not yet been able to substantiate the entirety of. Now it's somewhere up to like 45 to 60,000, according to Trump, of protesters that are dead. There's still not substantial information indicating that even 30,000, the original estimate of people, were fundamentally killed. I'm not saying people weren't killed, but you still have no full supportive documented proof. And for anybody that says, oh, they have, they ban it, they turn off the internet, my guy, like, if there's a will, there's a way. People they're going to get the images out. They're going to get the images out. I don't care what anybody says. There is always a way to get stuff like that out. It takes an incredible, all it takes really is time. And we've been at this for over a month now. So you have that. And then on top of that, well, we have to eradicate the ballistic missiles. We have to do this. We have to do that. Oh, then it's regime change. And it flip-flops every so many days. And then it's just like, we have to open the straits back up. And then it's, no, I don't care about the straits. And now we're back to the straits, when in reality, the Hormuz Straits have been open to people that are willing to do business with Iran. And if they're willing to cooperate with the type of payment, which is in the yuan. So you have lie after lie after lie after lie that just constantly is bombarding the amount of propaganda that they're trying to use. And it's overwhelmingly being dispelled or dismissed by average people that have a few hours or a couple minutes of their days that just happen to do some basic research that can tell you that most of this rhetoric and this empty propaganda is just absolute garbage. And look, I get it. Iran spins their own stuff too. Everybody does. But this is my country. These are the people that are supposed to lead my country. And not only are they saying just some of the most abhorrent, repugnant, reckless things and their character diminishing day after day, and then just folding it into lie after lie after lie. Not one truthful statement is being said at all. At all. And then on top of that, you have the whole fiasco with the jet going down, which now there's information that's slowly been coming out, which is I think evolving somewhat from rumor into more of an asserted position. I'm not saying a fact, but more of an asserted position, to where now it seems as if the whole fiasco with the pilot was a test operation to see if we could even incur in Iran. And that was a freaking disaster. And to all of the people that sit here and say, like, oh, yeah, we've obliterated all of their defenses, all of their air defenses gone, their navy's gone, all of these different things. Look, like, in the end of the day, if that was the case, why do we got birds on the ground? Why did an F-15 pilot even have to eject? I thought we had air supremacy. Or in the very least, air superiority, which those are two different things, correct? So again, it's the constant lies. And now, and I had mentioned this before, but we have this situation also where it's coming out again from areas within the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, where it turns out that the numbers of between dead and wounded are somewhere around 700. At least that's what I've heard. I don't have a hard number on that, but these are numbers that are said to be closer to the actual total. And of course, they're going to stifle some of that, but if that's the truth, and we're already even, like, I don't, even if it's not, just a majority of dead. Just the fact that that would even be close to the wound, like with that including wounded, we're even close to 700, right? Is abhorrent in a war that we should never have been a part of. It's a totally unconstitutional, illegitimate war. And then you add on top of something else that had come out recently, and this is where I'm going to kind of get a little bit on a tear as well. But it's found that now the United States, since 2025, it's I think the later portion of 2025, was sending firearms to people in Iran, supposedly a group within Iran. Don't even know who the group is, but supposedly it was a group in Iran. And now those weapons are missing. So we were sending weapons as per what the CIA does, you know, because the CIA has never seen a regime change they can't get behind. They love starting chaos in places. So we've sent weapons over or to people in Iran, and now we don't know where the weapons are. Funny, where have we seen that before? It couldn't be places like Syria, Ukraine, and several other places that we've funneled weapons into, surely. Surely it's not going to fall into the hands of disaffected people, surely. But let's not count about that. But what I think is pretty interesting, and I believe it was Jack from Black Scout Survival who kind of brought this up, but and I kind of agree with this very much, where it's funny. They don't get background checks. They don't get questions asked about them. We just send them automatic weapons, heavy weapons. We send them any of the weapons that we feel that they need. They don't need prior approval. We don't care about where they come from or who they are, but yet you look at an American, and mind you, they all say that they're fighting, you know, we're fighting for the Iranians' rights. You know, it always comes back to freedom and rights. They really love to harp on this. But what about American rights? You know, what about our natural rights? Well, that's not popular. No, we have to regulate the type of firearms we can get. We have to have the NFA and several tax stamps, and we have to have paperwork. You can't just get a suppressor without paperwork. How dare you? How dare you? No, you're less than, right? You have to have a permit in many cases to buy a short rifle, a variant of a pistol, different parts such as suppressors and other functional items. You're heavily regulated. You can't buy an automatic weapon. You can't buy all of these different things that they give out like candy to everybody else, even though that we live in supposedly the home of the free, or, you know, land of the free, home of the brave. No, you can't do that. But yet it seems like every time we hand out weapons like candy, they either get sold on the black market or they get sold to groups that we supported and funded for a very long time. And at one point, if I remember correctly, I believe it was in places like Syria. I could be wrong on this, but I believe in Syria at one point you had the Department of Defense fighting with forces against the CIA's forces. That's really awkward, and that's a story as old as time when it comes to the Middle East and the United States. We fund one side, we fund the other side, we send them weapons, we do this, but God forbid the average decent, hardworking American that's killing themselves, trying to make their house payments, that destroys themselves to make ends meet, to buy a loaf of bread, to get some gas to throw into their tank, which, mind you, where I live is almost $5 a gallon. Even the mid-grade, I think, is like something like $4.19, and that's not even that bad. We're not even hit with some of the worst gas prices. You look at basic housing, rent, heating, all various forms of utilities. You look at all of this stuff. We get absolutely bent over a barrel and raped And to boot, you can't speak your, if you speak your mind and you talk about things that you're not supposed to talk about, and you want to have a gun that you're not supposed to have, you can't have that. But some separatist group 3,000 miles away, we have no problem giving them firearms. Hell, ask the cartels. We love giving weapons to people who eventually will turn on us, which is another reason why you don't ever get involved in foreign entanglements and stupid alliances. The pattern here invariably is the fact that this government unequivocally, unadulteratedly freaking hates you. These people are mongrels, right? They don't care about you. They're in it for a quick buck. They will exploit you, your family, and everybody you love and care for. And when you dissent, you get people that show up at your door, the secret police. We always hear about the Iranian IRGC showing up at, people's homes and shooting people in the streets. Pot, meet kettle. How many people show up or how many people are in prison without charges? How many people have been imprisoned indefinitely for years in the United States? A lot. How many people's homes get raided and then they just say, that was a mistake, wrong house. By the way, we're not going to pay for the funeral costs of your husband who we just shot. We're not going to pay the medical bills of the child we just maimed due to a flashbang grenade. But have a good life. Those very same people who sit there and piss and trample on your rights. This government is a government that is wholly becoming destructive of its means. I would say we're there. Our founders warned us about people like this. They warned us about people like this. And it is my firm belief that everybody in this current administration that has not left, that has not walked away, that has not resigned in protest to some degree, that continues to walk forward in lockstep with this administration, you should be shamed publicly, privately, everywhere. You should be shamed for the rest of your life. You should not have a moment of rest. You should not have a moment of sleep ever. And that's the least. Many of these people should be brought up on charges for some of the stuff that they've done. But you'll never hear about it. This is the same administration that sits there, tells you, we care about you so much. But they can't even finish or even start investigations. I know I've harped on the Epstein thing a lot. But it's one of many, many numerous things. See, it didn't start with this administration, but this administration is a fever pitch. We are at a point of volatility. So now, as the whole world sits on a precipice to see what Trump's going to do next, I would like to remind people that you matter not to this government. Congress has abdicated their authority. They're not holding anybody responsible, and that three people that are, I hate to say it, no offense, Massey, no offense, Marjorie, and maybe Rand, perhaps, right? Maybe one or two others. No offense, but as much as you guys are trying to do the right thing, most of Congress is gone, dude. They've abdicated every sense of their responsibility. You have a justice system that is absolutely destructive of its own means, in its own way. Most of our Congress is bought and paid for. You can't, there's laws being passed, and I've talked about this in several states, to where you either get in trouble for not doing business with certain people or certain countries. You can't speak your mind about certain people, countries, or issues. And if you have the wrong barrel length, you're a criminal. If you refuse to disarm yourself in places that that demand that you do that, you're a criminal. Even though you've done nothing wrong in your entire life, you are a felon and a criminal. This is what this government is standing for. And I guess maybe this is a point where I think it really needs to be said, but I cannot emphasize enough two things. To the people in the military, and to, if there's any decent public official out there, you remember what your oath is, and you remember what the moral decisions are that you have to face, and understand that you have the right to refuse to take part in anything that is criminal. You do not have to be a part of something illegal. You do not have to be a part of something that is destructive of the foundation of this country, that violates not only the rights of Americans, but the rights of others too. You are not bound to follow illegitimate and illegal orders. You're not. Do the moral and right thing. Do the proper thing. And to the average person, the average American, the yous and me's, we are far past the time to where we should have been not complying. This is not an individual sport, mind you. It's not an individual activity. But at some point, you have to realize that this government, because they don't care about you, they don't like you, they don't want you to be even remotely close to an equal, and they certainly don't want you armed to throw off their intentions, because they do want a docile society. They want one that's formed around compliance, in submission, as we see in the foreign policy, right? They're not looking for allies. They're not looking, to have people be agreeable to them. No, they want domination. That is what this administration is hell-bent on. As with previous administrations, sheer domination. They want full compliance and they want subjugation. The U.S. federal government wants vassal states. And they want subjects within their own walls. They want compliant, non-dissenting, disarmed subjects. And we have to figure out what we want to be and what course we are going to take. We have constitutional ways to start stripping these people of their authority and making sure that they never get anywhere close to a public job ever again. These people should never be able to go through their life without hearing shame follow them. And like I said earlier, they should be in prison. A lot of these people should be in prison for some of the things that they have done. But I'm here to tell you that at some point, non-compliance is going to be the only way. Do not be silenced. Do not be threatened, coerced, or pushed into a realm to back down. You owe it to your families first, and then your communities. Do not be their little plaything. And I'll end it on this. Do not ever let any government official, low or high, ever take your arms. Period. These people want your compliance, and they will come for it one way or another, because what happens abroad is going to come back home eventually. Do not be silenced. Do not be disarmed. And do not let them take your hope. This is Redbeard with Sentinels of Liberty.